Hello, everybody. Today is August 4th, 2016, and here's your cannabis business news. Leafly released an article today that asked if cannabis raises your blood pressure. And according to some of the studies, right after consumption, occasional users will experience a mild to moderate increase. But what's interesting about this study, though, is that afterwards and after repeated use, um, users and cannabis users would definitely see lower blood pressure levels. And this was actually supported by some research studies. Interesting enough, this to me shows that beyond a lot of the medical conditions, qualifying conditions that states and countries have, blood pressure could be another one. Very interesting. Another article asked if cannabis is going mainstream. So typically, because of this federal illegality, we don't see cannabis advertisements on typical, fronts that we would normally see other advertisements. Imagine going to the Super Bowl and actually seeing an ad for cannabis like you'd see for Budweiser. So traditionally, it's been through the media that is really cannabis focused, like Dope Magazine, I Read Culture, etc. Well, May 2016, I just found this out. There was an advertisement that is for a licensed facility in Washington, and the licensed facility is called Avitas. And I watched their commercial, it's on YouTube, and it's just promoting cannabis and how cannabis can add to creativity. So definitely looking at an adult use market. This guy, it starts out with this guy who's trying to paint something and he cannot paint it at all. He tries some form of cannabis, doesn't really help the painting, another form doesn't really help the painting, and then he tries the Avitas product, and boom, he's a masterpiece of Picasso. So really interesting to see that there are different fronts of ways to actually get out into a different market, and these guys used YouTube. And then two other pieces of information that I think is valuable to know is that Ohio, a few months ago, actually passed medical regulations for medical cannabis. Probably not going to see it for a few years, and right now it doesn't even actually allow anyone to smoke, so they probably could not consume the Avitas product that I just mentioned. But what's interesting about this article is not really about what's going on necessarily for the production of cannabis in Ohio, but it's how the state is treating the employment laws, right? Of how can you use medical cannabis, and will that be okay for the employer? So this is actually a huge issue that going forward into much more legalization, I think we're going to see a lot of issues with employees and employers, and do they allow for medical or adult use cannabis amongst their employees? As we know, if you get drug tested, like any type of cannabis will be in your system for more than a day, a month or so. So depending on your body composition. So I want to quote something real quick. So the law says very specifically that employers still have the right to have a zero tolerance policy regarding the use of medical marijuana in the workplace, and employees do not have the right to sue their employer for taking action. This to me is very interesting. It really questions a lot of our own rights as citizens, but again, it's the employer who would ultimately make that law. We'll see if it gets overturned. We'll see if when there's going to be some type of case, not necessarily in Ohio, because New York has something similar. Oregon's laws are a little bit different for employers, but in the end, if you're working at a place, the employer can really say what they would want their employees to do. The last one, Australia, we talked about it yesterday, and two pieces of news that are happening today. So the Australian government has announced, and I don't think it was today, I think it was probably last week, but the news kind of caught hold of it today, that it will establish a medical cannabis scheme as a priority and as soon as very practical. So I listened to this interview. What does that exactly mean? They're looking to regulate it. So they're looking to regulate it like Israel would, so they can start doing clinical trials on everything. And then they're also looking to actually put in a regulatory framework to allow for licenses for cultivators, processors, etc. So very interesting. But at that same time, yesterday, there was a $2 million seize of cannabis plants in Australia. So clearly there's definitely a market in Australia. So that's it. That's all the news for today. And today is August 4th, 2016.